All right, David. Tell us about your career as a lawyer. What does it mean to be a lawyer in today's world?
Well, yeah, I've written about it quite a lot. I've written about the qualities needed in an advocate, the qualities needed in a judge. Both of those are in that Cassandra Voices. I've obviously published referee publications, constitutional law, and miscarriages of justice. And I've written also extensively, and something I mentioned earlier, questions of legalism and morality. And I suppose you look at it from different perspectives. First of all, I think that what's going out the window are principle ethics and standards of not just of customer care and client care, but of right and wrong and truth telling and not truth telling and so on. And a lot of that is to do, and I hate prosecutors. I generally regard them, and British ones aren't so bad, but mostly, certainly that Americanized prosecutor, which is creeping into Ireland, is basically just a corrupt criminal public avenger. This win at all costs mentality, secure a conviction against somebody, even though it's untrue, because you've been politically manipulated in order to do that, or you're getting funding from the various organizations. The Americans are very good at this and have various international funds, some of which are funneled through Ireland to go after people they don't like. But I don't care very much for that mindset. It's destructive of human rights and it's unethical. And therefore, I think a proper level of vocational lawyering is at one level to grasp onto the traditions of the truth, fact, a measure of principle, a measure of standards. Now, you've got to be flexible at the same time. I mean, you shouldn't hold people to a purer than pure account. I mean, I wrote a review of Geoffrey Robertson, Pusey's autobiography, where he defines himself as a Gladstonian liberal and a Puritan. I'm a Gladstonian liberal. I'm not a Puritan. I don't like self-righteous Puritans at all. They're as bad in some respects as some of the people they give out about. I'm not saying Geoffrey Robertson intrinsically is, but that kind of self-righteous Puritan Brahmanism morphs into absurd, snobby, conclusory, dogmatic statements. And that leads to the question that a lawyer's got to earn a few quid by as fair means as possible in our compromised universe. In terms of that, of course, some of it plays out, not just the articles I've written, but my teaching of jurisprudence. But my career has been unconventional, you could say, but that's too dismissive, I think. There's been a constant set of themes, a commitment to human rights, a commitment to civic and social justice, a sympathy for the underdog. I'm totally anti-corporate at this stage. And that's why I got on ultimately towards the end of his life. My late Adrian Hardiman was by far the best Judge Arms produced in the last 30 years. Because, he was basically, as I am, as Lord Denny in Britain, is in favour of the little guy. It's the little guy who always gets screwed. And I don't like corporations because they screw the little guy. And I don't like states because they screw the little guy. And I don't like... Now, that doesn't make you an anarchist. It makes you an educated middle-class person. It makes you a moderate. So I think part of that is how do you earn a crust, doing as much good as you can and as little bad. Now, in the context of my career, I've undergone processes of demonization of me as a human being and then saintliness. So I take both with equal levels of lack of seriousness at this stage. When I and Judge Hardiman represented Mr. John Gilligan, who's then and now one of Ireland's most famous criminals and made films about him, such as Veronica Guerin, or films he was allegedly involved in. We did so, myself and Judge Hardiman, based on given that as our opposition to a statute which has proved to be a total disaster called the Proceeds of Crime Act, which has undermined the cause of civil liberty. It's been the slippery slope of the undermine. When you start, accepting police officers' evidence on anything, certainly Irish police officers, who shouldn't just take a pinch of salt, you should immediately disbelieve. Since they're a criminal entity as well. And you take that and you push that through, not all of them, of course. Let's try and have some level of moderation about them. But we got demonised, myself, pardon for representing. Lawyers for Gallagher. No, we don't. And this is the beginning of the slippage in the culture. You do not endorse your client's point of view. You are not representing someone because you agree with them. You are representing a thing the Irish courts for 20 years have totally neglected, called the Constitution. It's like the Soviet Constitution at this stage. It exists in theory, and it's meaningless in operational practice. And when people start using phrases like the common good or ordre public or public morality, it usually means they're going to screw people's rights, which is what happened with the Gilligan case. But I was demonised for that, and I just got fed up with the whole thing. I said, get out and get a degree in Harvard. But of course, it's tagged my entire career. I mean, I was getting commercial. They pulled it all. Because in a closed community, that once you do this, they associate you with your client. Or it's in their interest to associate you. And I'm grateful in retrospect that ultimately I lectured constitutional law for King's Inns for 16 years and published a huge amount about constitutional law, because I think the fully fledged nature of David's interest in constitutional law and what I've written and spoken about is now clear for all to see. But that was the process of demonisation. Then we have the process of Saint David the Good, which is when I set up the Innocence Project in Dublin in 2009, and we managed to secure the posthumous pardon of Mr. Harry Gleeson, who was executed in the 1940s by basically state-sponsored murder and framing. The same problem that exists in Ireland today exists then. I don't think the country's changed a jot, really. Francis Fitzgerald, I thank you very much, Mr. Justice, ultimately for pushing it through. And the family, and those of Gleeson's family that were alive, were delighted with me. And I think the press were delighted, or some of them. And there is still, within some of the educated class of Dublin, which are often in the media, not so much in the law courts anymore, a sense of civic justice, And then it became kind of St. David the Good. Well, I think I'm a good person, but like a lot of people, I'm imperfect and I have my bad sides to me, and you don't go from a process of demonization to sainthood, not Saul on the road to Damascus, nothing like that. It's just that both things are the same. They both flow from my commitment to due process, civic justice, constitutional values, fact-finding, not framing people, not being corrupt. They're the same thing, but they're perceived differently. And that is because what you do is now subject to the Spain doctors and the managing of the message and everything else, where if you are doing good, it is almost magnified. And if you're doing bad, as they perceive it, or whatever they perceive to be the case, that is also magnified. And all of this is dumbed down anti-intellectual nonsense. If you are committed to due process, civil liberties and human rights, then you do represent the bad guys. If they're introducing a ludicrous statute that could affect loads of people's rights, which is what has happened, the Prisons Crime Act. And the bad guys also include, who are the bad guys, if we want to put it in those simple terms? Well, in my view, the bad guys in Ireland are the politicians, the bankers, and most of our corrupt lawyers, knee-deep in criminality. They're the bad guys. Some of our police force, not all of them. Good people also do not get too cause-driven. I'm a great believer as a lawyer in the cab rank principle. I'm basically a whore for hire, a gun for hire, a cab rank tart. you are asked for your services to perform a service. If you have the time to do so, you should do so. The world is full of these fake human rights lawyers funded by the Ford Foundation, the Republican Party of America, and all these bullshit academics making moo-moo sounds about being a human rights lawyer. Every bit, I'm against climate change is terrible. It's really dreadful, it moves me. Well, so am I. Yeah, but I'm not going to represent a gangster, but he's got rights too, And the whole discourse has been shaped to being in favour of gay rights, transgender rights, sexual equality, most of which is totally passé bullshit. And let's forget about social economic destruction, housing, healthcare rights, and neoliberalism is forceful. Let's stay away from those issues. And then when we're talking about introducing a statute to attack illicit gotten gains of drug money, well, why don't, if we do have a process of crime, I'm all in favour of this, why don't the police go to the offices of Goldman Sachs? Or go to the bankers? But of course they don't go to the very rich. They go to the person selling shoes in the market in Dublin. So it's crazy stuff. These tax collection statutes are tax collection further to fund even more corrupt and criminal entities, such as the corporations and the banks. And they don't turn the finger on themselves. In terms of my other representations, I've represented whistleblowers, and I've lectured about them at Middlesex University. Not anecdotally, I lectured the entire syllabus this semester because I absorbed all the material. It was useful to compare my practical experience representing whistleblowers, in fact, being a de facto whistleblower myself, against the data and all the information. And if you blow the whistle on corruption now, the truth-telling whistleblower, you're reputationally personally destroyed, and there's no protection for you whatsoever. There's theoretical legislative protection. Ireland trumpets its whistleblowing statutes, the most advanced in the world. Nonsense. Jonathan Sugarman, the banking whistleblower, was rendered unemployable. They wouldn't bring him to the banking inquiry. When he did finally get to talk to our glorious bunch of redneck politicians at the Dáil, and he starts making a very moving statement about how he's been destroyed by this and how institutional Ireland never apologises for its mistake. They said, no, let's move on from that. Which means after we've destroyed you, screwed you, lied to you, misrepresented, introduced you, and rendered you a gibbering wreck, let's move on from it. Nothing quite captures the gobshiteocracy that are Irish politicians. But the point is they control a lot of the agenda and judicial appointments and so on. So the toxic time bomb continues that way. But it is also the case that in our very dangerous and dark age, that if you are going to blow the whistle, you should be a bit more consequentialist, to use something I slightly disapprove of in a way, because unless you want to be a martyr to the cause, blowing the whistle in corruption now in our post-truth universe means you're going to get screwed, which is all very worrying. That those things that define my career as a lawyer are things that are no longer commitment to due process, civil and criminal, a belief in social economic justice and housing rights, a belief in due process, in constitutionalism and legality. And now I'm a criminal defence lawyer in London. I'm very glad that Alan Jones gave me the opportunity at Great Jones Street. I'm doing very well. I'm enjoying all my cases. But I'm still conscious that even though I do very well and I win a lot of the cases, and I provide client care, provide standards, that my type of lawyer is like the Dylan Thomas poem, The Dying of the Light. The light is dying because the cause of civic justice and human rights is going down a dead end.